the I started as a PhD student. I have a PhD in conservation biology from the University of Minnesota, and at the time when I went back to graduate school, I thought there was going to be lots of environmental studies faculty positions opening up. That hasn't been the case, but these jobs like I have now and that many of you on the line have for sustainability officers didn't exist at that time. So my esoteric dissertation topic became popular. Who would have guessed? But so my background is in conservation biology. Before that, I did a master's down at Duke on environmental econ and policy, and I originally was a geology and natural history undergrad. And in between my master's and my PhD program, I was working for a place called the Office of Environmental Assistance with the state of Minnesota, and I happened to see this book sitting on a colleague's desk. And since I was in graduate school at the time, this was very interesting to me. So she and I started a conversation, and the next thing you knew, we were running the first, what we called Greening the Campus conference in the state of Minnesota, and probably in a lot of the mid part of the United States. We brought in David Orr, and that was about in 98-ish, maybe even 97, something around there. And we used to organize that. And when, so that's what got me started in this whole thing. And then I needed a dissertation topic, and I started talking to my advisor, and he said, I keep hearing about this campus greeting stuff. And I said, oh, I just ran a workshop on that. And next thing you knew, I was running this thing called the Sustainable Campus Initiative at the University of Minnesota that we started in 2000. My advisor and I made it up. We came up with a mission to improve the environment on campus, the physical environment really, and increase teaching opportunities. And we did two things: an urban ecology assessment, which ran into my dissertation, and a wetland restoration on campus. So that's how I originally started. And then I ended up taking some research that had been done at the long-term ecological research sites in Arizona. There's only one in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's another long-term ecological research site in Maryland. But I took some research that had been done in Arizona on urban nitrogen budgets, and I did that for the University of Minnesota, and that's what ended up being my dissertation. And people still ask me about that every once in a while. I get questions about it. Now there is a whole nitrogen footprinting project that's going on, but at that time there wasn't any of that. I made up my own calculator. So when I was a recent graduate, I also at that time had recently had a baby, and so I had this infant that never slept, and so I was trying to figure out a way to get a job, an academic job, and while not sleeping at all. This was very difficult. And I went to go talk to one of my mentors at Carleton, and she said, what you need is a flexible job. You should go talk to Kathy at the Science Education Resource Center. And next thing you know, I was at the Science Education Resource Center writing websites, helping faculty teach better about various different things. And so I started writing websites, and two of them, this is before the sustainability site guide actually existed, but at the time I wrote this, what I called campus-based learning web module, and I did a service learning web module. Since then, the Science Education Resource Center has put together a whole bunch of things, including like the sustainability site guide. So it's, I think, one of the best repositories for activities and courses that I have seen. I think there's some other places that take syllabi and things for sustainability, but this one's really good. But at the time when I was there, this was still brand new. So I was teaching at this the Science Education Resource Center, And I was working on these things that wrapped the kind of work that I had already been doing through the Sustainable Campus Initiative and my dissertation into these web modules. But that was almost 15 years ago, like 13, 14 years ago. And after I was working at the Science Education Resource Center and their grant ran out of money, so did my job. I ended up working at Macalester College, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, and then I'll get into the web module. So Macalester is a small liberalized college. We're a little over 2,000 students now. We're in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we're only 53 acres, so we're pretty small. We're small, but we're mighty. We've been doing sustainability stuff for quite a while. Back in, they actually had one of the first environmental studies programs in the 60s and 70s, and have been involved long before I was there in 2008. Here's a couple of their policy and awards. The Macalester, where I am now, just to give you a little plug and context for where I'm coming from, we have a sustainability plan that we've had since 2009, and we have 3 numeric goals: climate neutrality by 2025, zero waste by 2020, and 30% real food by 2020. 2020 seemed like a long ways away in 2009, and now it's not that far away. We also incorporate education for sustainability, include urban sustainability and wellness, and this is our diagram that we use for sustainability. I saw that diagram from Bemidji State, and I really like it, and we've been using it for the last few years. We incorporate wellness into our sustainability diagram. So at Macalester, since living laboratory projects are my thing, my soapbox I've been standing on for the last number of years, I've been doing that since I got to Macalester too. So I have a living laboratory website. I've either taught or co-taught a couple senior seminars who've done our greenhouse gas emissions and our climate action plan. I teach a class called Sustainability in the Campus. It's project-based environmental studies elective. It's 2 credits, mostly because that's what's practical for me without any extra money or time or people. And I run through the environmental studies department. So that's my students taking a picture of the steam plant, the fire in the steam plant. Here's another couple of my students who did some signage for dorms. Those little turn off the lights things got in all the dorms. They've done a bunch of different projects. So that's where I'm coming from. I've both taught classes, and I've been trying to convince other people to teach classes that use the campus as a living laboratory. So let's go to this web module. So this is part of what started in geoscience, and so it's in this teaching entry-level geoscience. So the starting point module is one of the areas on the Science Education Resource Center that's set up for beginning faculty, and it is set up and was originally written as a guide for people just beginning this and geoscience faculty bringing. So there's a real bias in the writing about geoscience, and one of the things that I would like to do is get some more examples in here from an interdisciplinary context. But the whole module goes under, and all of the modules in this particular site have the what is, why, how to, and examples, and resources. The resources on the references on the bottom. So in all of this is the landing page here, and then it'll walk through the what, why, how, and examples. So I put a few examples. Most of the examples in here are pretty old too. And a lot of them are from what I had done at the time at Carleton. So what I say is that in a living laboratory, the campus is explicitly linked with education, and the campus buildings and grounds are used as teaching tools. When I originally wrote this, I called it campus-based learning, but that was because the campus as a living laboratory wasn't a term yet. So I have since updated that part in here to call this campus living laboratory instead of campus-based learning, since no one knew what campus-based learning was anyways. So for the why, I pulled out both the pedagogical reasons. So the why do we do this? But we do it because we can teach better with it. It links in with service learning, which also shows that you can teach better that way. And you can connect in with civic engagement, and you can connect in with other student initiatives, sustainability initiatives on campus. And then the real practical reasons for it is that this is simple, the logistics are simple, and it's inexpensive. You can actually work on your campus without having a budget for field trips. And you don't have to take the time to get someplace else. So that can be a real benefit for some classes. The meat of this module is in the how-to. So, and these 5 things are the ones that we talk about, find projects that are appropriate to the class. And this is all set up for faculty as a faculty person. So find the projects, and in here, since I was writing this for geoscience, I was talking specifically about geoscience, but a lot of these things are, could have some more examples. As a heads up on a lot of these, I have had a student go through and try to check out all these links, which I have gotten on the resources page. I've gotten them cleaned up on the resources page, but not necessarily on all of these pages. So some of these do go to dead links. I know this Campus Watershed Projects doesn't exist anymore. But the ones that still exist I'm going to make sure that they can get the updated websites. People do tend to change their websites in the last 15 years. And we talk about finding resources and people, looking through your advisory committees, how to prepare your students for this kind of work. And what I found in doing this kind of work is that students need to be reminded to bug people, because often they will give up after one email when the email gets lost, and that they can't ask for things on Friday afternoon and expect to have them for a presentation on Monday morning. So I always try to tell my own students and anyone who's doing this kind of work to really prep these students. And if you can, prep the staff too, so that they know that students are coming, and that they know they're going to be asking for data or information or whatever. And I found that most of our staff are very happy to do that, but having some heads up is a good thing. I always have my students present in the class for sure, and I try to invite people to it. And then after they're done, I also send out their papers or projects or whatever it is out to the other people on campus who might be able to do something with them. It's easy to do in my own classes because I know to do this, but in the classes that I'm working with, I try to make sure that we get, I try to make sure that I can get the projects out to the people who can actually implement them. And if I get the projects, I can do that. Sometimes projects happen on campus and they don't tell me, and so I can't do that. I added a piece in here on assessing student projects, and these are examples from the other parts of the Science Education Resource Center. So because a lot of these projects are group work, there is a student peer assessment rubric here. I do use that one in my class, an evaluation rubric for written reports and for oral reports, and getting some more oral presentation tips and peer evaluation questions. I know that there is some other work out there about how to have students work in groups better. And if anybody has any good ideas on that, I would like to add some more of that, because that is a particular, can be a real problem for these kinds of projects. I always have students work in groups, and most of my groups get along well, but I also try to prep them at the beginning of, you know, how to have them work better as a group and not drive each other crazy. The other piece in here that I think is crucial for all of us working on living laboratory things is to archive these student projects somehow. I think that there are also some other examples, and maybe some of you on this call have some, of how to integrate your living lab projects better into your library, or the best of the projects into the library. I try to keep all of my projects that I can find on my own website at Macalester. When I was at the University of Minnesota, I used to get a lot of projects, especially on my wetland. And sometimes I had to get just the best ones, or ask the professor to just give me the top 2, top 1 out of a class, instead of getting 15 design ideas for our wetland, only some of which would be even remotely practical. So I am specifically looking for some updates of this archive, and I think that there are some out there. This is the examples that are tagged within the Science Education Resource Center database. So mostly these are either things that I wrote or ones that I knew of and put in here. I am looking for some more resources that we can add in here. I did get a student who went through some of the Sustainability Site Guide, for instance, and found some more examples that we can put in here. So we'll have another, dozen or so to add in. And after this call, I will follow up with Carolyn, and she can send out the submission link for how you get your classes in here. Let me show you what's involved. And they're either full classes or they're assignments within a class. This one happens to be with the class that I co-taught from ages ago with Chris Wells in environmental studies. And this was what we did for doing our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So all of them have the same format. You have a little summary on the top, you have the learning goals, you have the context for use of this activity or class, the teaching materials, the syllabus. Here we have the tools that we use with the Cool Air Clean Planet. This actually needs to be updated now, because the Cool Air Clean Planet greenhouse gas calculator is now the SciMap. And so there's other things, even from this particular class, because I taught this in 2008. Teaching notes and tips. And this was what we did. And then the assessment that we used, and this is the same stuff that's in the how-to guide. And the references for this particular class. So that one, and this particular project was pulled out to be one of their exemplary ones. Let me get to another one. So the nitrogen budget one, this is one that is basically how to do my dissertation in a class. And I had done another one, this guidelines for college level nitrogen budgeting back in 2005. So this was the one I did there. It was not as extensive as the past one, but it kind of still shows you the same thing. The summary, the learning goals, the context, whatever teaching materials you have, what kind of tips you have in here, references, assessment. So the submission link has headings and some context for what kinds of information you would put in here. Now, if any of you know anyone to do one of these classes or one of the assignments, put them in the link. We'll send it out after the call. And then I need to know about it, because I can get them tagged to go into this particular web module. Otherwise, it just goes into the main submission for all of the courses and activities, and they have thousands and thousands in here under all sorts of topics. As I mentioned, this started with geology, so it's geology has tons and tons and tons of information in here. It has gotten more interdisciplinary and broader than geoscience only. So sometimes some of my humanities faculty are like, but it says science in the title. I'm like, I know, but it's a really good resource for examples. So let me get back over here. So that was the walkthrough of the project. And now I'd like to open the workshop part of this. And I'm going to get out of this presentation and get back to the GoToMeeting so I can see the questions on the GoToMeeting. So with that, one, I can open it up for questions and also for comments on how we can, if you know of things that would be good examples to put in, of things you know we should get in there.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Suzanne. You have a flood of questions coming in, and I'm going to read them out of the chat box for the benefit of folks who might be on the phone and not have access to the chat box handy. So Maria is asking, have you made assessments between living lab students versus traditional students and measuring if the living lab students are learning more?
I have not exactly. There's a little bit of work that I particularly had done on assessing students that were in some classes at the University of Minnesota and at Carleton. So this is a long time ago for environmental education research. And we found that we asked a bunch of questions in their surveys, and we went back, we found some of them and asked them what the impact was about this type of class. I have a whole bunch of other course evaluation projects that I have asked the same questions for the last 9 years, but haven't analyzed that. So in the environmental education research paper that I wrote way back when, we did find we certainly found benefits. It wasn't a evaluation of, a traditional versus a living lab. If people have good resources for that, we'd like to know about it because we can add it into this module.
Great, thank you so much. We have a resource from Brandon who's linked to Action Research Team, which is one area of rubric for enhancing group work. So here's an example publication he's linked there that we can share with the chat notes. So Brandon's also asking, which degree majors take your 2.0 credit hour campus environmental science class? And he also says, thanks, great presentation.
I get a whole bunch of people. Sometimes I get seniors who need 2 credits, and they're from all over the campus. Most often, however, I get environmental studies students. Right now I have a small class because I have it at a very popular time. And I have a biology major. I have a couple environmental studies. I have a first year who doesn't know what she's going to be, but she's probably going to be environmental studies. And I tell them at the beginning, because this particular class right now that I'm teaching, I have one first year who doesn't really know what she's going to major in yet, and she doesn't have as much background as the others. And I have a student who used to work in my office and is now working for food service and has worked in the office in the summer, and she knows a ton. So at the very beginning, I told all of them, I said, everybody in here has different background and different skill sets. Some of you know a lot about sustainability and some of you don't know as much. And frankly, sometimes it's good to have the people, or actually not even frank, I told them that frankly, it's good to have people who are newer in sustainability because they see the connections that sometimes the people who've been around for a while take for granted. So I make sure everybody knows that their perspective is welcome, and it's not a class that's only for people who have a lot of background in it. So it's a real mixture, but I would say it leans towards environmental studies majors.
That's great, thanks. And feel free to keep typing questions into the chat box or unmute your microphone and come online and ask us questions. I have one. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how this guide has been used with faculty so far, what that process looks like, roughly how many faculty you've shared this with, and what, I don't know, kind of guide us through that interaction if we want to maybe use this to work with faculty on our own campuses.
Let's see. Mostly, I haven't used this one as much on my own campus. Mostly what I've done there is, for instance, I knew that a faculty member was teaching a class, and I knew I had something that I wanted to do in that class. So I'm more likely to get the faculty involved that way. This one, I always send out, I mean, I give this link when I do faculty development workshops. Sometimes I do a campus as a living lab kind of thing that gets into the talking about teaching new faculty, or actually that's open to any faculty. They have a little lunchtime thing. It gets a little awkward because I'm not on faculty, and some of the faculty really care about this. So I call myself staffalty. There's several other staffalty. All of the staffalty on our campus are not really accepted as faculty members. So we have to be a little careful about how we frame things. So I can frame things as a resource. I can ask specific faculty if they want to do a project. But I can't be seen as trying to push a curriculum, because the faculty get really jumpy about that. So I've been able to use being the sustainability manager as a way of and the fact that we have sustainability education as one of our goals, but it's frankly one of our weaker goals, I think, at my own institution. So I work in this area, but I tread very lightly. I have much better luck at other people's institutions than at my own. But I have found people to do living lab projects on my campus, and there it's usually, hey, you're teaching a hydrology class. I know hydrology needs to calculate runoff potential. I know this also because that's what I had to do in a hydrology class when I took one. And how would you like to do some runoff potential for our particular campus? And that instructor was absolutely amazed at how much her students loved working on a campus project that might possibly save us some money on our stormwater fees that we get charged. So.
That's great. I'm definitely going to borrow that term staffalty. That seems appropriate. I think that's a very honest answer. It can be kind of difficult to straddle this boundary between offering a resource and not, appearing to push curriculum.
Yeah. One more thing on that too is I do have a group of faculty on my sustainability advisory committee, and I have been able to work with them to be the front person. So then they can be the one saying, hey, we need to do this. And other faculty, let's do a reading group or whatever, and then they can pull me in. That is much easier, because otherwise I will just get beat up, even from some people who and some of our faculty are more hierarchical than others. But I also find it funny because I'm brought in to do faculty development at other people's institutions.
Well, it sounds like those interactions have been effective, at least, right?
Yeah, you're never a prophet in your hometown,
Exactly. I was interested, too, in hearing more about some of the student group work that you talked about. Maybe if you could tell us about some of those projects. I think that, kind of how to evaluate the contributions of students working together on one joint project is always a challenge. And I wonder if you can tell us a little more about this, and we can maybe think together about some methods for assessing that.
Sure. I have always done group projects, partially because it's a practical way to teach these classes, and because there's enough work that they do better if they work in groups. And frankly, once they get out of school, nobody's doing anything on their own. They're always working in a group. So learning how to manage a group is a really good job skill. So all of my classes have always done group projects, at least in pairs, sometimes in threes. I don't usually like them to do fours and fives. It's too hard to manage. Um, for the greenhouse gas emissions inventories, we had them work on they wrote a big group paper. It was a little bit nightmarish to get them to do that, but that is also a skill that's good to know. If I were going to do that one again with a whole group doing a piece, I would set them up with a structure. So here is your outline, and have different groups pick up different pieces of it instead of having them come up with that structure. That's actually a good thing if you're writing a really big paper with a whole bunch of people. Set up the format first and then set up how you're going to get things reviewed, like who is writing and then who is editing those pieces. That would have helped a lot. And when we did that particular project, but most of mine have been 2 or 3 students in a group. I set them up at the very beginning, and I actually usually have them brainstorm what the worst group project is that they've ever worked on and what happened. So if you are looking at what was the worst group project, you know what to avoid. And I tell them, okay, we want you to avoid doing these pitfalls that you had before. Usually it's the person who doesn't pull their weight, or they don't show up to meetings, they don't do what's asked of them, things like that. A professor colleague of mine in one of my classes, no, one of my students told me about agreement, a group project agreement, which I can actually, this is a good idea because I'll add it into this resource list because I use it all the time now. This group project agreement, and so it lays it out very clearly that these are what your expectations are as your group project, and you're supposed to show up at your meetings well prepared, doing the things that you were supposed to be doing. If you don't show up to a meeting, your other group members will assign you something to do. And you're also expected to try to figure out your group dynamic problems, if someone is a problem, first among yourselves. And then if it still is a problem, you're supposed to come and talk to me and we can figure out something. They all have to sign these things and they return them in to me, and I scan them and put them up on the top of my Moodle part for my website. That has helped a lot. Then it's really clear that some students, what their expectations are of each other. The other piece, in one of those resources on the guide, there is a group matrix for how you rate your group members and yourself. And on occasion, I do get a group member who hasn't been contributing as well to the groups. I've only had a couple who came to me and said, this other person is doing nothing, and it's really annoying. All of them have been able to pull things together by the end, but it was pretty clear in their evaluations of each other that who was really doing the work and who wasn't. Only one gave himself really high scores when everybody else gave him low scores. So but all the rest of the students, from what I could tell and what they gave me with their evaluations, they matched up. So let's see. So that's how I have done the group projects. I try to get them some, sometimes they call it scaffolding. I try to give them some scaffolding so that they can be successful, and we can get a good product by the end of the class. The other thing that I do in all of my classes is I go through the topic of whatever the topic is for that day. And then I often do a quick check-in with all my students on how well their projects are going. So I try to know how well they're doing long before this would be a big problem. So I do a lot of check-ins. I do some written check-ins along in the class, but I normally do go around to all the groups and at the very end of the class, usually the last 10-15 minutes ish, and have them tell me how they're doing and if they're having any problems that I can help them brainstorm around. Usually their problems are so and so didn't get back to us or we're supposed to be meeting with this one and we haven't been able to get them, or they haven't answered our emails or whatever. I'm like, don't wait, so if you can't get this one, then go to the other ones and then come back to that one, that kind of thing. Those are most of the things that I have had to deal with.
That's really fantastic. It sounds like they're getting a really great education, not just in how to, what the projects are and learning more about sustainability, but learning more about how you do sustainability by working with other people. So it sounds really brilliant. We had another question come in from Kian Wee, who says, any examples where research contributes to the better maintenance of the campus, research to real world impact?
That was another one that I did a long time ago, and there's probably some other research out there. At the time, there really wasn't much. When I did this research paper, this was the one that was in the environmental education research. I'm sure we have this on the Google Doc that we have for this group. And it was that one we looked at projects that actually got in the ground at the University of Minnesota and at Carleton. And then we went back where we could find them and talk to the students about the impact of what this was for their education. But then we also looked at things that actually got in the ground, things that actually happened. And I found out later when I was at a conference, the Rio Plus 20 had a conference down in Brazil, and there was a higher ed sort of side conference to it. And I ran into two women from the UK who work at Plymouth University. And we got to talking, and then they realized, they said, oh, you wrote that article? I remember that article. Ever since I read that one, it completely changed how I do faculty development. So now I have my faculty development, or my new faculty people, they always go through the steam plant, and they always go through the grounds of the campus so that this can be part of what they are looking to do. So I know in that little example that these folks from the UK now have this idea, and this was relatively new in Europe. They're better at it now. But in Europe, they always used to be sustainability education, and kind of forgot that they had it, buildings and grounds. That wasn't seen at all as part of being something that was connected in with sustainability. In the United States, we were more, hey, let's get our greenhouse gas emissions down. Let's figure out how we can do zero waste. Let's do these things on the operations side. And we tend to not necessarily translate that into the education. So where it can go together is the most powerful, hence this whole area of the campus as a living laboratory. So I know that I wrote at least one article on that, but I think that there's some other research out there. The downside I have found is that a lot of practitioner types don't write up our projects, and the faculty think of research as being separate from what they're doing in their classes. So they don't think of doing research on the class, educational research really. There is some research, there's more research on service learning, and a lot of that, there's a whole bunch of that in the sustainability area too. But I think there needs to be more on this. So call out for all of you to get together with some of your faculty, especially ones on education. Let's get some more articles written about this.
Sounds fantastic. Somebody seems like they have some really great music going on in the background. I don't know what it is. I've tried to do some muting on my own, but if you have some great music coming on, might you want to turn that down or mute yourself. So right on cue, we have a great question from Maria, who says, "Great presentation. Thanks for sharing the resources. What do you need our support in?"
Well, you need to know what other resources are out there that we don't know. Anything else that you want? What do you think your faculty would want? Somebody does have good music.
I know, they have great taste. I was wondering if folks on this call might have examples. One of the things that struck me about the guide right away is you're right, the geoscience nature of it. And I find that on my campus, it can be difficult to get the initial buy-in to convince people that sustainability campus lab research isn't just natural sciences. And so like kind of the first example you use in that conversation to say it's not because I worked with this architecture project or I worked with, like that can kind of drive their impression of the whole program and how they can get involved. So I wonder if folks have examples of non-environmental science projects they've worked on that they would want to share, or maybe could contribute to the guide, they could tell us about here, maybe briefly, that might be a good first impression or a great segue into, hey, here are some other things you can do to contribute if you're not a natural scientist.
The University of Minnesota had a really good one that connected art and sustainability. We should add that one. Well, add that one in if there's anything written up about it. But does anyone else have any other ones? I know there's art out there. Probably communications.
One thing that we've had success with is some psychological interventions. I think the behavior change aspect of sustainability is really interesting to folks. So partnering there has been really fruitful. Brandon Morton is saying, we have an English professor who requires essay on evaluating the campus landscaping. That sounds great.
Ooh. Yeah, let us know yeah. So Brandon, make sure that we have your contact information because I think that would be a good one to add in.
Yeah, and Suzanne, you have a form, right, for adding these in that I can send with the notes, right?
Yeah, we have and we'll send that around. That is the actual form that any faculty member or staff person or whoever can actually get these into that form. When I was showing you the example, there's a submission form for that. And I will send that out. And the only thing that we need is just to know that it's there, because then we'll tag it so that it gets into this particular resource.
It's great. And Brandon has provided the name of the professor, which is fantastic. And Liska says, very extensive resource. We have a ton at UBC Seeds, which is fantastic.
Oh, excellent. Good.
Yeah. Maria says NCSE is doing an online handbook for community colleges, and there's a chapter on living labs and a place for our case studies.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just add, because those kinds of things we can add into that section, for example. The examples pulls from the database, but we can add more pieces in here. Are there other things that you need as you're working with faculty? What are your faculty asking for that this resource might be able to help you with?
Well, I know we had actually surveyed this group a couple months ago. One of the things that came up was the need for assessment resources. So it looks like you have several of them there. That's going to be really fantastic. Wanted to give a shout out to those again.
Yeah, I found and especially as a beginning person teaching classes, can't call myself faculty, but one time I was adjunct faculty.
Staffalty.
My staffalty job now, and before that I was considered visiting. So I would teach for environmental studies at Carleton. They actually even hired me when I was a graduate student. I did this Preparing Future Faculty program, which is phenomenal. If any of your schools are big enough to be research institutions and such that have your Preparing Future Faculty programs, they do an excellent job of teaching people how to actually teach college level courses. But my mentor for that was at Carleton. She was a former professor of mine, and she was perfectly happy to be a mentor for me. And then she said, hey, we need someone to teach this junior seminar for environmental studies. It's only 1 credit. Are you interested in doing it? Can we pay you? I'm like, yeah. So one of the environmental assessment classes that's written up in that module is that class. And my other classes now, the sustainability in the campus class that I teach now, is very much similar to that junior seminar, where I had all the students work on projects, and then we worked on different topics. We talked about different topics as the semester went on. And sometimes even these classes, there's been a few of them like the one I teach that I've heard of around, but a lot of faculty don't know that these kinds of courses are around. So environmental studies people usually are the ones that teach those, but then there's also I don't know, how to practically do these things, and the assessment is usually the biggest problem, because it's grading is always the biggest pain if you're teaching a class. And these assessment courses, for the assessment resources are really good for that.
Yeah, one thing I liked about this resource compilation is that it's I think I've seen a lot of resources out there, and we're compiling more and more for staff and people who want to do this from an operational point of view. But to be able to have a resource for faculty is really a niche, so that's exciting. Okay, great. So we have a question from Darren Malone, who says, I'm in a K-12 independent school, Stewart County Country Day School, but the interdisciplinarity aspects are the driver for us. So a solar assessment may look at environmental science, finance, and economics, as well as ethics in the course of study, and we'll have access to teacher support in each discipline. That's a really cool model.
Yeah.
I like that attack, or not that attack, but that approach, because, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these are interdisciplinary questions.
Yeah.
Kind of jealous, Darren.
Yeah. Darren, do you have some things written up about that, how you guys do that? Or do they have example courses, or how this connects in? I don't know if you guys have to connect into the state, like, what do they call those in K-12, where you have their guidelines for what you have to teach?
Well, we're an independent school, so we don't have to follow those sort of state guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
We have established some sort of course outlines that are sort of a scaled back version of what I saw on your CERC website from Carleton.
Mm-hmm.
But the driver's there. You know, what is the intention of the project? What are the disciplines that it looks to touch, and who are the mentors in each of those disciplines? What are the outcomes? And ultimately, we try to build in what off-campus resources, architects, engineers, you know, whatever they might happen to be, can contribute to the project. We're currently trying to build our own library of resources, kind of like, again, that Carleton Library, or over at Princeton, where they have sort of a course study page as well. So, you know, it's all a work in progress, but that's the direction in which we're heading.
Yeah, have you been able to connect with your actual library to put any of your student papers and things on some kind of web archive or anything?
I'm actually not working with the library in that aspect, but with our communications department, so that our website would have a link to those kinds of studies as well.
Oh, that's good. One of the things, and maybe somebody on the call might know this, but one of the things that's hard is to be able to archive all this material. And I found when I was at Carleton, our students tended to always do the same composting projects. Like, they all wanted to do the same composting project that was done 3 years ago, but the only person who knew it was done 3 years ago was the faculty member, who sometimes knew about these projects and sometimes didn't know about them until they were 3/4 of the way done. So one of the reasons I think this archiving piece is so important is so that the students can build off of the research of the other ones, right? It's similar to science research anywhere, but in the scale of the campus. Has anyone been able to archive these projects well? Sometimes I think that there's some schools who do nice databases where they can tag what these things are and you can search for them. And I think that there's some other people who have been able to work with their libraries to get this into some kind of digital resource for student work.
Hello, I can chime into that. Liska from the University of British Columbia. We've had some success with creating our own library, and as well as working with our campus, our main library, the main repository for different theses across the campus. So that we, for every one of our projects, they all result in, at the minimum, a research report, and that gets posted on our own library and also gets sent to the main campus library. So the students can effectively cite 2 different publications. I think where we're at now, we've had a library for about 18 years, so quite some time, is that there's still some challenges with it in terms of making it most accessible to, especially to practitioners and other institutions who want to implement it. So that's kind of the next stage of what we're exploring is how do you visualize and translate this knowledge in a way that's very communicable and implementable kind of at a glance with our institutions. So it's sort of a new era, you know, in the speaking in the vein of knowledge translation and mobilization and what that looks like. So I also like to pull to call out if anybody has any inspirational sites they've seen where they've done a good job of that. I think that's another great aspect for sharing the work, in addition to the ability to archive and not reproduce or replicate the work, and ensure that projects are building off of one another to help move the dial on the sustainability issues, but also how do we create more effective impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Looks like there's some resources pouring in, some links from Maria and Brandon that we can share.
Excellent.
Any other last resources, thoughts, questions, anything in our last 3 minutes of the call?
Anybody have any good classes or professors that they've worked with that might be good for getting into this database or the examples on the back of this module? Good for both classes and for assignments within classes.
I know our office's director, Shauna Staffelty, I guess, teaches a course. She's, of course, full-time staff, but has one course that she teaches once a year. So that whole course is designed around using the campus's lab. So I can definitely check with her about sharing that syllabus.
Yeah, let's get that one in for sure. I know probably a whole bunch of you have worked with like somebody who's done a really good job with the classes. I've got a physics professor who is working with our solar projects on campus, and I have a chemistry professor who was going to include the chemistry of solar as an assignment within her class too. I'm going to lean on those. Sometimes I have to interview them and then write it up for them and then put it into this thing because I never get around to actually putting their stuff into the resource. But hopefully your colleagues on this class or on this list you guys can lean on your faculty to put your stuff in and put your stuff in too, or maybe you can interview them and then write it up and put it in. That's what I do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are always really great stories when like we find our work has gone somewhere else, and then 2 iterations of communication later we hear back that it's been used. So that's always great stories to share, and it makes a difference to the faculty and the staff that put it together, I think. So Brandon says he's co-teaching a new class this fall, Environmental 1402, largely Sustainability Living Labs class. He's going to do the lab, and Charles Siegel doing the lecture. Sounds great.
Perfect. So when we send out that submission link, we'll have to get you guys to all put your classes in here.
Yeah, and I'll capture the output from the chat boxes so we have the stuff that you guys have typed in already today. Mm-hmm. All right, with that in mind, knowing that we'll be sending you a link so you can input some more information and resources, I'll let you guys get on to any 2:30 meetings or 1:30 meetings or whatever time zone you're in. Have a great rest of your day or morning or afternoon. But thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us and sharing this resource. I know it's been really inspiring.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for having me, and a goodbye from the winter storm in Minnesota that's barreling down on us.
Yeah, I hope you can burrow your way out of the snow. We have daffodils here, so hopefully soon you'll be looking at some nicer weather.
Pretty soon the snow will melt. So yeah, spring will show up in Minnesota.
I hope so.
All right.
All right. Happy
Thank
spring,
you.
everybody. Happy Earth Month. Thanks for joining.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.